Oh, baby, do we got some good stuff for you guys this week. Penn State, Ohio State, big-time matchup that will help decide and sort out the top of the Big Ten Conference. And we have a rivalry game between the Michigan State Spartans and the Michigan Wolverines. This is the Butt and Breneman Show. I'm Jake Butt, he's Adam Breneman, and I am honored to be joined by Penn State legend Adam Breneman to help us break down. Let's start right there with Penn State traveling to Columbus. Both teams undefeated, both teams rolling, both teams with their own identity. And I kind of just want to take this quite simply and say, let's look at when each team has the ball, what you're looking for and what you think might be some key factors. Let's start with when the Buckeyes have the football. What's on your mind?
Man, there's so much to dive into in this game. So many great matchups across the board, and a ton of talent. That'll play in the National Football League. When Ohio State has the ball, I think the key is going to be Penn State's pass rush. And can Ohio State's offensive line protect Kyle McCord? Penn State's defensive line, led by Chop Robinson and Adise Isaac, is one of, if not the best in the country, getting after the quarterback, averaging, I think, 4 and 5 sacks a game. Ohio State's offensive line, if there's been a weak spot, has been giving up sacks. They're in the back half of the Big Ten in sacks allowed. So if they can't protect Kyle McCord, if he doesn't have time to throw the football, it's going to be a long day. And to me, Jake, it's not just about getting pressure on Kyle McCord. It's the fact that he has to go out there every snap, knowing that he has a first-round pick, Chop Robinson on the left side, knowing Adise Isaac is on the right side, knowing Penn State's going to bring pressure. We talked about it before. It's the illusion of pressure. It's knowing you're going to have to deal with pressure, not just the fact that he may not have time to throw. Even when he does have time to throw, he's got Chop Robinson coming off the edge. So that's the matchup. The tackles against the Penn State's edge rushers are what I'm going to be watching.
I completely agree with you. I think that is going to be a deciding factor. How does the O-line, and I want to add in the tight ends like Cade Stover and the running backs, because they have to be involved in protection, especially if you're bringing 6 or 7. Those guys have to be involved in protection. And if they're only bringing 4, they'll have to chip because Chop Robinson and Adise Isaac, and really Dennis Sutton. There's a new guy every week. Penn State averaging 4.5 sacks per game. 4.5 sacks per game. That leads the nation. They are extremely disruptive. So how does Ohio State deal with that? Why does that also matter? We have enough data at this point in the season. I'm not a huge numbers guy, but they do tell a story. Kyle McCord, under pressure, per PFF, when Kyle McCord is under pressure, has a 34 grade. That is towards the bottom of the Big Ten. I think it's 123rd of all quarterbacks in the country. So when he's under pressure, he's a different quarterback than when he has a clean pocket. That is a big storyline. Here's another piece of this, though, Adam. A lot of teams, you hear this. Manny Diaz is perfectly fine playing press man coverage with Johnny Dixon and Kalen King and Daquan Hardy. A lot of teams would say, man, I don't want to do that with Marvin Harrison Jr. and Ibuka. Let's assume he's healthy and playing. But they did it last year. Like you would say, they did it last year. Johnny Porter and Kalen King, like they were matched up with Marvin Harrison Jr. on third down. They were running 0. Manny Diaz is perfectly fine with that. Those quarterbacks are not running from anything. The corners, they're not running from everything. They're excited for this matchup. So all that in mind, what's another way, I guess, you can combat the pressure? Because I really don't think Ohio State would want to sit there and just sit back in the pocket and give the ball to those guys. You know, if you were the Buckeyes, what would be some of your game plan to handle some of this pressure?
Well, I mean, anytime you're going to get pressure on the pass, you got to be able to run the football, or it's going to be a long day. If you can't, if you're getting the heat up every time you're throwing it, you need a run game just to get the defense to back off a little bit, maybe change up what they're doing, put yourself in second and third down and manageable. You know, that's a big thing in this game, is who can stay ahead of the chicks and get ahead of the sticks and get themselves a manageable third down situation. So I think Ohio State's going to try to establish the run game and not completely put this game on Kyle McCord's back to have to throw the football all over the field. The other part with all the playmakers Ohio State has is let Kyle McCord be a true distributor. Let him be a point guard and get the ball out of his hand quick on the perimeter, run some screen passes, get the ball out. Even if you're picking up 3 yards, that's an extension of the run game. Getting the ball out to Marvin Harrison Jr., like getting those guys a ton of touches with easy completions that he's not having, that where you take the pressure out of it. When you run a screen to the wide receiver, you run a screen pass, the pressure doesn't matter. How many guys they're blitzing, what Chop Robinson does around the edge doesn't matter because you're getting the ball out of your hands so quick. So you can eliminate a lot of that by getting the ball on the perimeter.
Yeah, man, that's another big piece of this is the secondary tackling by Penn State, particularly out on the perimeter, because, hey, you hear the word RPO all the time. What does it mean? It's run, pass, option, pretty self-explanatory, but what does that mean? It means that you have a run called and a pass called. Well, how do you know what to do? Well, you just look at the numbers. That is just a simple thing. If Penn State has extra numbers in the box and they're weak out on the edge, you throw the screen out to the weak numbers. They're not weak. You just throw to the screen to the weak numbers. And at that point, it's on the wide receiver blocking of Ohio State, and you make one guy miss, and there's some serious space out there.
And Jake, I do think, to your point too, that if there's one weak area for Penn State, it's their size on defense. Like they can run around with anyone, but they're not huge up front. They're not in the interior D linemen aren't huge. So if there is anywhere that they can take advantage of, I think it is going to be trying to run the football and get some, because it's going to be tough to outrun a lot of those athletes on the Penn State defense. These guys, Curtis Jacobs, you mentioned the corners. I mean, these guys can fly around and run and are pretty good in space.
Yeah, man, I called Penn State. I've called the last two Penn State games, Northwestern and UMass, and I look at it and I say, when teams allow them to run, you're mismatched, because they're the fastest defense I've seen on the field across all of college football this year. They are extremely fast. But what happens is when teams are pressuring you and they're downhill, they're flying downhill, if you're running outside zone, they're going to fly and flow. If you're running screens, they're going to fly and flow. But actually, sometimes the weakest point, running up the middle, if I had to pick a point, has been a weaker spot for Penn State because they're so downhill. If you just hit it right into the teeth of the defense, I think that gives you your best chance. Okay, let's go to the other side of the football. I just can't wait for this matchup, dude. I'm literally, I can't sleep at night. I'm so excited for this game. Let me ask you this, because Drew Allar is a sophomore. He was brought in for a game like this, 5-star. Sean Clifford, extremely underrated. People love to point out his flaws, but that dude won football games and he was tough as nails. But they brought in Drew Allar for this game and this moment. What are your thoughts on Drew Allar going to Columbus in this matchup?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot that goes into it, man. I was just thinking about this earlier this morning Drew Allar, he's been so poised in the time we've seen him. Looks like a veteran out there, not a first-time starter. But he has not yet walked into an environment like Ohio State with the magnitude of this game. I was in State College last night. You can feel the energy around that place. And the thought is that this is finally the year that they're going to beat Ohio State. So the expectation, the outside hype and noise, Drew Allar needs to do everything he can to not let that impact his preparation, not let him impact his day-to-day. I mean, Drew Allar, an Ohio kid whose girlfriend goes to Ohio State, there's a lot of connections here that between Drew Allar and Ohio State. This is a big, big game, the biggest he'll play in his career to this point. By far the best team he'll play this season so far. So there's a lot that goes into it. I do think that for the first time, and I know I get a lot of flack for saying I'm Penn State biased, but I haven't picked Penn State to beat Ohio State for years. I don't even know if I ever have. This year, though, Penn State looks ready for this moment, and Drew Allar has looked ready for it in his last 6 starts. He has looked prepared. He has looked like he has full control of the offense, and they have played unbelievable complementary football on all three phases. So if there was ever a year, if there was ever a moment, I think Penn State's ready for it this year, and it all starts with their quarterback. You think back to 2018, Jake. 2018, that was now 6 seasons ago, that James Franklin, after the Ohio State game, sat on the podium and gave his great to elite good not great speech. I don't know if you remember that when he went on his rant when they lost to Ohio State about how we're a good program, we're not yet great. We're great, we're not yet elite. That was 6 years ago. They haven't beaten Ohio State since then. This is the time for Penn State. You have to win this game. I think they match up better than they have ever before. They match up way better with Ohio State than Michigan. This is a must-win game for Penn State.
Yeah, man, I completely agree. In a huge opportunity. It's not I don't want to say career defining or a program defining. Like Drew Allar will have a long career. He's got plenty of ball left. Penn State, they've recruited so well. James Franklin's got him in a great place. So there's a lot of ball left. But man, what a win would do in this scenario is kind of communicate to the nation that Penn State has taken that step. And it's a little step because they've been damn good, but it's that next step, and particularly on the road. As we talked about McCord's numbers under pressure versus with the clean pocket, Drew Allar's numbers vary differently, significantly differently at home versus on the road. That does mean something, and he's going to have to play his best game with that in mind. I was, looking at, as I've covered Penn State, the big conversation that comes up is explosive plays. Why isn't Penn State explosive? Going into the Northwestern game, Iowa had more explosive plays than Penn State. So then I looked at it and I said, why would they do that? Well, okay, you have a young quarterback and you have a great defense. They're probably saying, hey, man, just don't make mistakes. Let's move the ball. Let's keep our defense fresh, and we're perfectly fine punting it. But I don't think that tells the full story, because as much of an explosive play helps you, negative plays hurt you. And I say that to say this. Penn State, there's a stat called stuff rate, meaning how often do you call a run that goes for 0 or less yards? Penn State has the second best stuff rate in the entire country, only behind Air Force. So when they call a play, rarely do they go backwards, rarely. And what that means is they'll get into 3rd and 6. 2 2-yard runs and you're at 3rd and 6. They are perfectly comfortable living in that area. So I think that's a big thing is Drew Allar, as much as we say this is a career-defining opportunity, you don't have to be someone that you're not at this moment. You have to understand the big picture of the team and be disciplined with your football. One area, they do not turn the ball over.
No.
They do not. They have 2 turnovers on special teams and 1 on offense in a heavy rain last week. So they do not turn the ball over. What do you think would be the key matchup then for when Penn State has the football?
Yeah, I think number one, the shots are going to be there on the Ohio State defense. We know how Jim Knowles likes to play that. They play a lot of one high. It's either the fire zone.
It's similar to Manny Diaz.
Exactly. Yeah, and they'll play man to man a ton. So there will be opportunities to throw the ball down the field. Keandre Lambert-Smith needs to have a huge day for Penn State. Their wide receiver one, who has really come on this season and had a big first game. That's the room that Penn State's been unsure of. Who's going to step up at wide receiver? So Keandre Lambert-Smith needs to have a big day. But in order for those shots to be there, Penn State has to run the football. They have to be able to run the ball, and they have to knock off some explosive runs. I mean, with 2 of the better running backs in the country, Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, they've been shockingly unexplosive this season in the running game. And you made great points of why that doesn't really matter, and why if you can eliminate the stuck runs, or you can stay ahead of the chains, that's a good thing. It's great. But against a team like Ohio State, they're going to have to break off some explosives. So I look for that running game. Can they pop off a couple 15-yard runs, get Ohio State, opening up something in the pass and take that shot down the field with Drew Allar? He's going to have to take some shots down the field. Against UMass, Jake, you called the game. Very first play of the game, they tried to go for a home run shot. I think they were a little they were sick of hearing all the outside noise about it. First play of the game, they put the 3-by-1 in the boundary, faked the crack with the receiver, and did a play fake, but it didn't work. So they're definitely hearing the noise about the lack of explosiveness.
Drew Allar, he missed a couple. They did take him, but he missed some opportunities downfield last week, and I think he had them. Now, conditions were not exactly ripe to hit those explosives. All right, so let's as we close out this game, I have to close out this because we could talk clean through till Saturday about it. Give me some key players. All right, we talked about Allar and McCord. We know Marvin Harrison Jr. Right? We know some of the elite players on each team. Who's a guy that you think could play a major factor, a guy or two in this game that maybe isn't the first name that people think of?
Yeah, for Ohio State, I'm going to go with Cade Stover, the tight end, the veteran who's played a lot of football. I think Cade Stover's got a chance now, especially with Brock Bowers' injury, of maybe competing for the John Mackey Award, depending on how he plays the rest of the year. But with all that we talked about with what Kyle McCord is going to be facing from a pressure standpoint, I think Cade Stover is going to play a big role in one, pass blocking and being part of the pickups there, and two, just being a safety outlet. I know you hear that all the time with tight end play, being a safety outlet, but really being a guy that Common Core can get the ball out to quickly, that can kind of get you a few yards at a time and be reliable in the passing game. So I'm looking at Cade Stover. On Penn State's defense, I talked about Ohio State needing to run the football in this game. I think Kobe King, their middle linebacker, we don't hear his name a lot, but he's solid. He's efficient. He's a great tackler in open space. He can run. I think he's going to have a big game in the middle of that defense, especially with the lack of size on Penn State's defensive line in the middle. That middle linebacker has to play really good football, get off blocks, read it well. I think Kobe King needs to come to play on Saturday in Columbus.
Kobe King's a good name because what happens is the individual stats aren't crazy at Penn State. And why is that? Well, because they're rarely on the field. They force teams to go 3 and out all the time, and then they blow everyone out, so their starters are rotating. So don't look at the individual stats. Kobe King, a heck of a ball player. For me, when I look at it, I'm looking when Penn State has the football, and in the spirit of explosives and in the spirit of beating man coverage, watch out for Trey Wallace, number 6. Back healthy last week against UMass, and Drew Allar came to him quite a bit. What I saw is a guy that has that extra juice. Keandre Lambert-Smith, to me, is a bigger body, longer strides. He's 6'1", but I don't think he has that top-end extra gear that Trey Wallace has. Every step is extremely explosive. So in the spirit of man coverage, you need someone that's going to separate, and you need someone that can take a 5-yard play and turn it into explosive like a Parker Washington did last year. And to go back to Ohio State, Travion Henderson should be good to go. Let's keep our eye on Mayan Williams, right? They've been beat up in the backfield. I think Chip Trayanum and Hayden, the back that came in last week, are two key pieces here, because if those guys can't go, someone needs to go. And what I like about both Trayanum and Hayden, those guys are one-cut downhill running backs. They don't think about it. And it goes back to what we say, you don't want to stretch this Penn State defense too laterally. You want to hit it now. Think about Travion Henderson's big touchdown run last year. That was right up the pipe of the defense. Cade Stover had a great block. When you're bringing the pressure, this like singular wall gets built. If you could break through that initial wall, there's a lot less help in the backfield. So those are some great names, and we'll definitely, yeah.
Chip Trayanum was recruited to Arizona State from Ohio by your boy, and then played running back, then transferred, played linebacker at Ohio State.
Wow.
And then switched back to running back. We were not happy when he transferred to Ohio State.
So how'd you find him? What'd you think in high school about him? You got any good stories?
So, well, when I got there, when I got there, Arizona State, they were already started to recruit him a little bit. And then I was the East Coast guy, right? So I was the one talking to Chip and being like, man, this is really it's a fun place to be, man. Like, it's not that far away. It's super simple because all the kids are, it's a long way away from Ohio to go to Scottsdale, Arizona. So we convinced them, but he didn't stay long.
Hey, you found him. You could say, hey, you found a hidden gem, man, and he's doing his thing now. He's a great leader too. Ryan Day told us earlier in the year he's not afraid to speak up, and you need leadership in a game like this. Okay, let's wind it down here, because there is another big game. We mentioned we'll talk Michigan State, a rivalry game. You don't know about a rivalry game, though, do you? Because your boys don't have a rivalry. Can you help me? What do you think about that? What does Penn State think about not having a protected rivalry in the new schedule coming up?
Yeah, it's funny. There's a lot of chatter on social media around people being upset with Penn State not having a protected rival. If I'm putting my Penn State fan hat on, I love not having a protected rival. Like, why would you want to play Ohio State every single year in a guaranteed rivalry game? And I'm serious. Yeah. I mean, it's all about trying to get an advantage in college football nowadays. We see it with a bunch of programs trying to get out of their non-conference schedules to get an easier schedule to get a path to the playoff. So I don't think Penn State necessarily wants a protected rival. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, I haven't talked to James Franklin about this, but if I had to guess, they were not lobbying for an Ohio State protected rivalry or a Michigan protected rivalry. I mean, for Penn State, who else would it be? Maryland, maybe, but that's not a protected rivalry.
I think it's Ohio State. You guys, since Penn State joined the Big Ten, they have played every single year, and I get it. So before I say this, I'm not taking a shot at James Franklin. If you don't like something, you have to look at what's being incentivized. Like, this is a product of the way we vote and get teams into the playoffs. Like, there's no margin for error. Now, an expanded playoff, I think there's more room to schedule games. So, and they'll play each other. They'll play each other. I think twice every 5 years, each team will play each other. But man, those were some historically great games. Like, something wild always happens in these games. It's two great teams. It's great color schemes. I love that too. So I kind of wish it was.
Color scheme guy.
Hey man, the all whites, the all white, yeah, dude. The red, the scarlet, or the navy blue. I'm a big fan of it. But one thing we do know is there is a rivalry between Michigan and Michigan State. I'll give you my thoughts, but I wanted to ask you this because let's be honest about the state of each program. Michigan rolling, in my opinion, the number one team in the country. And no, I'm not saying that just because I went to Michigan. I'm saying that because I believe it to be true from fans, so before you guys get on me about it. But Michigan State, different program, clearly. We don't need to go down the list of where they're at. Does that matter in a game like this? Do you even consider it? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all matters, but I don't see this game being much of a battle. I mean, I think Michigan's the best team in the country. I think they're playing as complimentary as anyone in the country. Their quarterback's one of the best in the country, so yeah. I don't really see this being much of a game. It's a great rivalry. I mean, it's fun. I mean, a year ago, remember what happened when these guys left the field? There was the tunnel fight and all the attention and what happened after for the last few weeks of just the drama around the programs. Michigan State's obviously in somewhat of a spot of turmoil, trying to figure out what the future looks like. I do think, Jake, that their quarterback looked pretty good in his first career start last Saturday, and the quarterback Hauser. He was efficient. I mean, he almost turned it over a couple times, and it was far from perfect, but he looked good. He looked like a guy that could be the quarterback of the future for Michigan State. And if they're going to keep this game close, Hauser's going to have a massive afternoon. Yeah,
absolutely. And he did look solid. As we wrap this down here, my general thoughts are, because I was scrolling the social media as we do these days, and people were like, hey, is this even a game? Like, is it worth watching? Like, hey, Michigan State's going to roll over. And like, as a guy that played in this rivalry, I can't believe that that's ever a thought. We've watched it, as you mentioned. This rivalry is built on hatred. Michigan and Michigan State, it's the big brother, it's the little brother. I say that because I love it. I love to play in games with significant emotion on the line. Both team wants to kick the ass of the other team, and that's exactly where it is. So there's no way Michigan State comes in here and rolls over. They're going to have some trick plays schemed up. They're going to be ready to make plays. They would love to be the team, to ruin Michigan's undefeated season in their national title hopes. They would love nothing more than that. So Michigan, and I'm not worried about it because of their leadership, because of everything that you just said. If they didn't have leadership, if they didn't have experience, if they didn't carry themselves the way they do as players, maybe I'd be worried. This Michigan team is ready. Like, there is no blinking from them, and they're ready to take that step. So another great game to watch, man. Super excited. Okay. Went a little long here, but I hope we delivered to you guys, because, as I said, it's hard to condense 5 hours worth of information into 30 minutes, man.
Can we end with your prediction for Penn State, Ohio State?
Penn State, my prediction.
I just want to hear it, and I want it on the record.
You go first.
I have Penn State by 3. Penn State by 3. Yeah, I don't have an exact score prediction, but I think Penn State. I think Penn State should be favored in this game. That may be a hot take, but I think Penn State should be a couple point favorites. I think they're a better team than Ohio State.
I would agree with you, actually. I think Penn State is a better team, and I felt they should have been ranked above Ohio State, though Ohio State had that great win against Notre Dame. Here's what I'll say. If McCord can handle the pressure, if they can get this O-line to handle the Manny Diaz pressure, that is key. I think there's going to be one big factor in this game. Manny Diaz will bring the pressure, and then he'll drop guys out of it. McCord almost cost his team the game against Notre Dame. He didn't see the rat safety, and it should have been an interception. That's going to happen again in this Penn State game. If Ohio State loses the turnover battle by 2, they lose. They cannot lose the turnover battle. On the flip side, Allar, if he continues the trend of playing the way he has in away games, I don't think Penn State has a chance. I think he needs to play his best game. These are two talented rosters. I think the deciding factor in this game is going to be special teams. And we've seen that historically in this rivalry. A close game, special teams matters. So that in mind, Penn State special teams has looked a lot better, especially coming off last week, than Ohio State. So that tips the scales with me. I'm going to take Penn State in this matchup.
I love it.
On the record.
On the record. That's what I needed. I needed that. I just
Okay.
needed that to start my Tuesday. I needed to hear you say that.
And Ohio State, happy to admit I was wrong if you guys go handle business. So looking forward to it, man. We'll find out on Saturday, noon kickoff. Cannot wait. You don't have to wait too long. It'll be the first game of the day. So Adam, man, thanks for joining. Excited to circle back with you next week as we talk about the outcome of this game and these games this weekend.
Appreciate it, man.